My name's Jackson Harp. Welcome to my horror music podcast. We're back at it again. And today I'm joined by a very special guest I'm really excited about, Megan McDuffie. How are you, Megan?
Hey, I am doing just dandy. How are you?
I am also doing just dandy. So glad to have you as part of the conversation. That was a weird way to
Yeah,
phrase that, but I'm happy to have you here.
happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Megan. I'm a full-time composer, music producer, and recording artist, mostly for video games and film, or anything that's sort of gnarly or retro or 80s inspired, because I do a lot of session vocals for other producers as well. So that's my shtick. I'm also a big horror fan.
That's quite a shtick. So how did you let's journey back? How did you get involved with what came first, music or voice work?
Uh, Probably music, although they were almost simultaneous and parallel throughout my trajectory.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I mean I've always been a musician to obviously varying levels of professionalism and success. Um, but yeah, I mean, from the moment I could talk, I was singing, I was dancing, I was, plunking out stuff on the keyboard, and that fascination and love, I guess, passion for music just never went away. And I always knew I needed to do something with it, professionally speaking. And that kind of just led me to where I am now.
Very nice. And when did you decide, that that music and particularly composition, when did you know that that was going to be part of your professional pursuit?
So, when I got to my undergrad at UCSC, I was originally a voice major
Hmm.
because I've been singing my whole life and love to sing. I still do. Um, but the program was very, very classically and opera oriented, and I knew that that wasn't really what I wanted to do
Hmm.
as far as a degree. So, um, pretty much at the same time, I was taking a film music class, and the light bulb just went off in my head, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is
Nice.
this is it." Yeah, you know, I've always loved films and film soundtracks, and I just kind of had a little eureka moment in like, yep, that was that was where my focus needed to be. So I switched majors and yeah, really started focusing on doing music for media and stuff like that.
And was horror always a part of, your interests and pursuits, or did that sort of come later?
It's funny. I was always curious about horror films. Halloween's always been one of my favorite holidays, but as a younger person, I was pretty sensitive. um, I kid you not. I think The Sixth Sense was my first horror movie, and it wasn't
Mm,
really even classified as such, but it freaked me out. And I was, what, 13, I think, when that came out, 12,
mm.
something like that. Saw it in the theater. It was super intense for me, but definitely a thrill. And then, as I got a little bit older and could handle more, I just started imbibing all of these movies I had been curious about throughout my youth, but was too scared to watch. And the more I watched, the less sensitive I got, and the more I enjoyed it. So
Nice.
I was kind of a late bloomer to horror, but it's one of my favorites now. So
Mine too.
yeah.
As far as music goes, were there any horror movies like while you were studying or, kind of first getting your feet wet in the professional world? Were there any horror movie scores that stuck out to you and really started influencing you as a writer or musician or anything?
Um, I mean, there are definitely some that stand out. Um, I don't know that they influenced me so much unless it was subconscious, of course.
Right.
Um, I One of the horror movies that really stuck with me was The Ring because I saw it in high
Mm,
school, and that was kind of before I was a super big horror fan. and the whole package, music included, really kind of stuck with me. It wasn't till later, It Follows came out, a handful of years ago,
Hmm.
and the score to that is just fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the aesthetic, I love the story, I love the pacing, just everything about that movie spoke to me. But like I said, that was kind of later on after I had already been doing my work for a while. Um, I love 80s horror. The Thing, is
Oh
kind of my
yeah.
quintessential John Carpenter score that I always go back to.
Hmm.
Yeah, and just classic themes, the Halloween theme, Nightmare on Elm Street. So
Nice.
love me some classics.
Very cool. And well, I mean, what are some horror projects you've worked on that have stood out that stand out to you as some of your favorite projects that you've done?
I wish I have I wish I could have a bigger pool to draw from. I would love to do more horror stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, I did a trailer for a video game that hopefully is still happening called Dead. Was it called Dead Lane? Yeah, Dead Lane. It's basically like taking the quintessential racing game, but putting it in a horror scenario,
Oh, I've
in a
heard of
horror
this.
setting. And it's not something I've ever really seen. So I'm
Yeah.
really hoping they succeed. I actually did a piece of music for a TV show, sort of a really dark, edgy witch TV show that was a really fun project to work on called Hexed.
Hmm.
Again, that's kind of still in production post, craziness right now.
Right.
But that same one of the same pieces I did for that TV show um, was used for the trailer for this Dead Lane game. So that's sort of like a little combination
Nice.
project, a track that I got to work on that was really fun. And one of the best projects, maybe not at the time, but looking back on it, was a romantic thriller called Honeymoon from Hell that was specifically written or was specifically created as a Lifetime original movie. And I scored that back in 2014, and it's like so fun, so cheesy, but it's like a full-on feature film, and I was so stoked at the time to do that, and I'm actually still seeing it air on Lifetime and getting royalty checks for that, so
Nice.
that's pretty dope.
That's that's pretty cool. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Um
So cheesy.
and you said you've done some horror movies and horror games as well. Are there any other like games you've done? You said you did the Dead Lane trailer.
Did. Yeah, I have a whole album of specifically like super mangled, gnarly, sound design driven trailer cues that
Oh.
have been used for stuff like the Predator remake that came out a couple years ago.
Oh,
That
cool.
I had some sound design from that album in the Annihilation trailer. So that was pretty dope to get those placements. Um, yeah, so I mean, I would love to do more horror. I've really been hired more recently for like my electropop stuff, which is super fun. But
Okay.
if anyone's watching this, please hire me for more horror stuff because that's it's like the dark and the light.
Yeah, there you go. Um, so how do you I mean you've got these this music and this sound design popping up in like like blockbuster films that come out in the theater. How did you sort of get on that pathway?
Good question. Yeah. So in my, you know, almost 10 years that I've been doing this, it's kind of anyone who wants to get into a music career will probably tell you this too, but you have to have your fingers in all sorts of different places,
Hmm.
um, and try to figure out what's going to stick. So I've tried many different avenues to try to make ends meet. Obviously stuff that I want to do, but just lots of different little things to make it work. And one of those was trailers, and I was recommended to a company called Position Music
Okay.
by a friend of mine who also does, trailer music and film scoring. And he was having good luck with them. And he said, reach out to them, see if they're a good fit. And I hadn't done a ton of trailer work up until that point. I had done some for a different library, but this company was really blown away with my stuff. And they're like, yes, we want to have you do an album of horror, dark action, sci-fi stuff. And because we like your sound and we think that could definitely be used. And so I spent a lot of time, 100 plus 200 hours on that thing. And
Oh man.
eventually landed some stuff, but it's one of those things where you kind of just have to try everything and be really productive to make it work.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's like I'm a jazz musician. So when you move to a new
Very
city
cool.
or something and you're like, I want to try and get on the gig scene, the first thing you do is you look for a jam session and then talk to
Mhm.
all the musicians there. Um, so is there some sort of equivalent for like composers or just people in the industry, like I don't know, is there like a like a writing club or something? I don't know, where like you guys congregate and talk and like trade numbers and stuff?
Uh, Not really. We are all scattered to the four winds. Um, I mean, there are huge conventions
Hmm,
for songwriting, and I try to go to GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, every year in San Francisco, but there's not really a centralized hub
okay,
for people that are writing for media.
right,
Um, it just it's one of those things. I mean, in any industry, it'll be the same thing, but networking is 100% what it's about.
right.
Talk to your dentist, talk to the people that walk your dog, just like anyone
Yeah.
you can talk to about it that will remember that you do that thing
Hmm.
is what is how it's how stuff happens. The best projects I've worked on were definitely through word of mouth.
Nice. And so in addition to writing music and doing actually before this question, you mentioned you worked on an album of like dark sound design stuff.
Mhm.
Where can people find that? Because that sounds really cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that is available wherever the rest of my catalog is. Everything is on Spotify,
Okay.
so check it out on Spotify. I do have a few pieces on my website, but the album is also linked on Spotify from my website, so that's a good spot to find it too. Um, I have a lot of stuff on Bandcamp, but not everything, just due to legal reasons and other people owning certain things.
Gotcha. So
But
like
yeah,
so
Spotify is everything.
right. So like Spotify and then your website for reference are like the places to go to find
Yeah,
all
I'd say
that
so.
stuff. Okay.
Hmm.
Cool, cool, cool. So what was I going to ask? Oh yeah. So in addition to writing music, producing sound designs, you also do some voice work. And
A
you've done some
little
voice
bit.
work. Yeah, well, on some horror avenues. There's a well, I mean, I messaged you shortly after we scheduled this because I was listening to a podcast I like a lot called Creepy, and you were narrating a creepy story. How'd you get
I
involved in
was.
that?
So like you, I'm just a horror fan, and one day I was like, hey, I love horror. I wonder if there are any really good podcasts with creepy stories. And lo and behold, Creepy was the first one that popped up. And I listened to a ton of it and then got the idea, hey, I wonder if they need more narrators. That would be so fun. And so I reached out to them, and I've been narrating for them regularly for over a year now. I think I've done like 52 stories.
Nice.
So, yeah, again, just it pays to talk to people.
Yeah, that networking thing. Social media really helps
Yep,
with that too, and just the internet.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah, it makes that very accessible. Yeah. So, crap, I lost my train of thought again. It's okay. I edit this, so it's all right. Um, okay, so a question I ask um, pretty much every horror composer that I talk to. Um, so you watch a lot of horror movies now. Are you ever like in the middle of watching a film and then you hear the score that's in the movie and then you start rescoring it in your head? Like, oh man, like that sounds all right, but they could have done X, Y, and Z. You ever do that?
I totally do. I do that with any film
Yeah.
where I think like, that's standing out in a bad way, and then my brain will take it somewhere else. Yeah, I totally do that.
So like when you take it somewhere else, where do you usually take it? What do you think is usually missing?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, Oftentimes it's that it is ill matched for the scene or the emotions in the scene, where it might not be intense enough for what's happening on screen, or my brain wants it to like chill the fuck out because it's too amped up. It just really depends, but most of the time it's just there's an emotional mismatch.
Okay. Is there a movie that comes to mind that you've seen recently, in either in the theater or on TV or something where you were like, oh man, missed opportunity for,
Uh,
something in the music?
I can't think of anything recently. Um, More often than me rescoring things into my head, I will notice a score for being good rather
Hmm.
than the opposite.
Do you have an example of one of those?
Oh man. I haven't Oh, I just saw okay, I'm really still on the fence about the music choices in this movie, but
Sure.
last night we just watched, a recent Adam Sandler movie called Uncut Gems
Mm.
on Netflix,
Yep.
and super intense movie. I'm still kinda like, "Did I like it? I don't know." It was really well done, but I've you know how a movie can be technically really good, but not very entertaining? This was one of those.
Ah, yeah. Yep, yep.
But yeah, the music stood out in a few cases, where I felt like it really did a really good job and it was an interesting choice, and other times the interesting was not a good interesting, and I felt like it was too much. So
Gotcha.
it was both.
Yeah.
Last night's movie that we watched it had both.
A little bit of both. Okay.
Mhm.
So something that comes up quite a bit, in fact, one of the other people, her name's Jade, that I spoke with. This came up where um, we were talking about thematic elements in movie scores and how you don't often hear that in horror. It's
Mm,
but
mhm.
a score can be effective when it uses kind of atmospheric stuff and ambient tones and things like that. Do you ever feel like that horror scores would benefit more if they used more melodic stuff, like a melodic approach, or do you feel like there's a balance, or do you feel like melodic themes don't usually fit um, in horror movies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm probably kind of biased because I tend to have a very melodic approach to most of my stuff, it's just how I write.
Okay.
Uh, and I feel like the most memorable scores are the ones that have melodic elements or that, lean more melodic than atmospheric. I've actually been missing that kind of in the last 5 to 10 years of
Okay.
scores where you get the big, Hans Zimmer drones, but there's not as many leitmotifs like John Williams would throw in there. And I've been
Hmm.
missing those. So I
Yeah.
kind of feel like if there were to be a John Williams of horror, I would be very interested.
That's a John Williams of horror. Boy, that's ooh, that would be good.
Right?
That would be
It's
so
just
good.
I would very much be interested in that.
You ever check out James Newton Howard?
He's awesome as well.
Oh man, I love James Newton Howard. He yeah, Signs, the M. Night
Mm,
Shyamalan movie.
mhm.
That was that's I cite that as like one of the first soundtracks I listened to that like really got me. Where it's like
That's very cool.
the movie hadn't even started and I was already terrified.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I feel like that one found a good balance between like melodic stuff, but also sort of the creepy tones
Mhm.
and things like
Yeah,
that.
I agree, for sure. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but it keeps kind of popping up
It's a good
here
one.
and there, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I should rewatch that."
Yeah, it was a good one. That was before the M Night train went downhill a little bit.
Derailed, yeah.
Yeah. um So, like, what are some of your favorite horror films that you've watched in recent years? And did the music stand out in any way with those particular films?
Yeah, so I mentioned It Follows. That
It
was
follows.
absolutely a standout
Hmm.
in my mind. Just
What
everything about that movie,
what was it
for
about the
sure.
music that stood out to you the most?
I think that it was different, but not in a way that didn't make sense. It was different enough for one to notice it, in a positive way, but
Hmm.
it didn't detract, like, it didn't go too far. And that's a really hard balance to strike, especially in horror where things can go too cheesy very, very quickly. So I kind of just commend everyone involved with that film
Nice.
for sticking to a vision. I'm trying to think of any other semi-recent horror films I've watched. I haven't seen a whole lot actually in the last few years.
Mm.
Um, I also have a soft spot for like found footage horror, which doesn't have music.
True. Yeah, I watched one. What was it called? It wasn't very good. Chernobyl Diaries was, I think, is what it was called.
Okay, I've actually been meaning to watch that. So you don't recommend it?
I don't. I mean, obviously, I try to encourage everyone to like watch it and see what you think, but I don't know. It was one of those found footage horror movies that kept forgetting it was found footage. So
Okay, yeah.
so like music showed up at one point, and there would be like camera angles that was like, okay, no one's holding a camera like
Yeah, yeah.
20 feet in the air.
Dang, that's too bad.
Yeah, I know, so much potential. It
Yep.
had its moments, but it was nah. It was all right.
Alright, good to know.
Yeah. Um, you ever check out Grave Encounters, the first one?
Oh my god. It's one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies.
Oh man.
I
Yeah.
lo I love it. Yeah, when I say found footage, that's sort of a benchmark for me.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
It's, like, ridiculous, but I love it.
There's a one horror movie that comes up a lot since it came out is Hereditary. Did you ever check that
Oh,
one out?
man. I did. That movie, man, like, I I'm so desensitized, except for a couple exceptions, and Hereditary is one of them. It
Mm,
just it stuck with me. Like, I just couldn't
mhm.
get it out, I couldn't shake it off me, and it was a weird feeling to sort of have that lingering.
Yeah,
So, in that way, that movie is amazing, but it's one of those that was super, super awesome, but I'll never watch it again.
that's fair. The score stuck with me in that one too. Like the last scene.
Yeah.
You remember the music in the
Oh,
last scene?
I do. Yep.
Oh man. It's like the scene was so terrifying, and then there's this beautiful melodic kind of gritty techno sounding
Yeah.
thing playing, and I was like, wow, that's so pretty, but I'm horrified by by what's happening.
So intense. A
Hmm.
similar film for me was The Babadook. That movie was
Oh yeah,
so, again, very intense, stuck around for a while.
very underrated. You don't hear that one brought up very much. That one, but I liked that one a lot.
Yeah, that
um
was that was a that was a trip.
is there a horror film has there ever been a horror movie you watched where like the movie was not good, but you thought the score was really nice?
Oh, you know what? Yes, and I'm having a hard time remembering what it was called. Um, I know Christian Henson did the score for it, and I remember thinking, "Oh, this is good. I'm gonna have to look this guy up." But the movie was meh. It was what was the premise? It was sort of a sci-fi alien kind of movie. Took place in like a big shipping warehouse.
Shipping. Okay, do you remember
I
when it
feel like
came out?
I feel like it might have been a British film. Um, ah, somewhere between 2010 and 2016, I want to say.
Okay. So that's a British movie? I probably don't know it then.
I think it's from the UK.
Okay.
Yeah. One there was somebody I recognized in it. I want to say John Boyega was in it,
Oh, okay.
maybe. Now I can't remember.
I'll have to look this
But
up. You said
I specifically, yeah, so I can't remember what the movie was called, but I remember who scored it and remember thinking the score was cool.
nice. With horror movies nowadays, you mentioned that you've been missing kind of a more melodic approach. I meant with horror movies coming out now, do you think you also mentioned it's easy to like kind of get into cheesy territory. So like if there was an up and coming, because I'm sure they're out there, I hope they're out there, up and coming like film composers who want to specialize in horror or kind of get into it more, what would some sage advice be, as somebody who's been doing this for a while?
Well, from the business point of view, network. Network
Network.
your butt.
Yeah.
Networking is literally, it's everything. You can have the best music in the world, but if nobody hears it, there's no point.
Right. Right.
So networking is your best friend. Um, Other than that, there's nothing really specific to horror other than, well, no, that's not specific to horror either. I was just gonna say be good to work with, don't be a
Hmm.
dick.
Right.
Be a nice be a nice person, be flexible, but be firm. Like you don't also want to take any crap from anybody because I've been there and it's not worth it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, I guess just pay attention to the emotional beats of whatever scene you're working on. Sometimes the director might not know what he or she is talking about, and you're the professional in that situation.
That's huge. I think that's really good because that gets forgotten a lot of like when, client asks you for something, you almost have to translate what they're really asking for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Yeah, the language translation and potentially just, I don't know, going overboard or not understanding the role that the music needs to play in a particular moment more than you do.
Hmm.
I was on a project once where they were so, I nitpicky is almost the right word, um, but they literally wanted me to Mickey Mouse everything. It's like this heartfelt, tragic finale where she's like going crazy in this locked room, and they wanted every single eye movement to be notated and highlighted with something in the instrumentation. And I'm like, you guys, it's going to sound like a Looney Tune cartoon if I do that. That's ridiculous.
That's so interesting. And Mickey Mousing, is that an actual term? I feel like I've heard
It
that
is.
before. Oh, that's
Yeah. That,
crazy.
that's the literal like scoring of every single action or what's happening on screen, like old cartoons. That's
Wow.
where that came from.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. I never knew that was, I think I heard that in a video recently and I was like,
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
like that's interesting. And you said it now and I'm like, oh my God, that's a thing.
It makes perfect sense, yeah.
It really does. It really does. Um, if you were, what would be like your dream horror project? So like, so
Yeah.
what's a better way to ask this? Well, actually, let's start there. What would be like your dream horror project to write for?
I would say anything that Carpenter was doing. I know he usually
Nice.
scores his own films, but I would love to work with him. I'm also a big Mike Flanagan fan. I
Oh
think working with
yeah.
him would be so cool.
Hmm.
He did a film before Oculus that not a lot of people talk about called Absentia.
Yes, I watched that last year. It was so good.
It was so good. I
Oh
loved
man,
it. It was low budget, obviously really kind of on the indie side, but he did it so well.
he knew what to do with that budget.
Yep,
That was the genius behind
exactly.
it. It's like it was a low budget, but it was all he needed.
Mhm.
Oh
Yeah, that just it proves, like, you don't really have to have a huge budget to do something
man. Mhm.
compelling. So, I would love to work with him on something.
Oh man, that
He's
would be
great.
so dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Mike Flanagan. Haunting of Hill House had a really good score.
Mhm.
I remember the music in that one. That was a bit more melodically driven. There was
That's true,
a
it did,
yeah, there were some themes in there that were really fun.
definitely. Doctor Sleep was incredible. I don't remember
Oh
the
yeah.
music that much, but it deserves a rewatch, and maybe I'll pay more attention.
Oh
I
yeah.
was transfixed by that whole experience, though.
Oh, Doctor Sleep was great. Did you read the book?
No, I didn't, and I want to.
The book is really good, and the movie was a challenge because if you haven't read, have you read The Shining?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so you know that The Shining movie and The Shining book are like way
Mhm.
different. And so going into the movie, I was kind of like, all right, what's this going to be? Because some of the
Yeah.
continuity in the book depends on the book, The Shining. But as soon as they announced Mike Flanagan was doing it, I was like, it'll be fine. He'll know what to
Yep.
do.
He's got this.
It's in good hands, and oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
Um,
it was really good.
yeah, Mike Flanagan's great. Favorite horror film? What's your favorite
Of
horror
all time?
film of all time? If you have
Oh
one,
god, that's so hard.
you can pick two or three, if that makes
Okay,
it easier.
that's way more fair. Uh, Man, that's really hard. Um, the original Nightmare on Elm Street is
Mm,
in the top 3.
yep.
I love trippy movies, anything with, like, a dream focus or just, like, weird twisted fantasy kind of focus, that's my jam, so that one for sure. Um, I'm gonna have to put It Follows up there in the top favorites.
Nice.
I do really love the original Psycho. That's a
Mm,
really fantastic film. Um, those are all really good. I also really enjoyed Insidious.
yeah, Insidious was really cool.
The other movies in that universe, less so. I think the first one is where it's at.
Yeah, the sequels got weird. I never saw the fourth one, but I saw two and three, and they got weird. Like
Yeah, I was
once,
just kind of,
yeah, once the time traveling thing was introduced, I was like, I feel like you haven't earned the right to travel through time yet.
yep,
Like
sure.
you went from like trippy and creepy and sort of weird to like, you know, Terminator. Like
Yeah, that's bizarre. I only saw the first 2. Or did I
hmm,
see the 3rd one? No, I only saw the first 2. But yeah, the first one's definitely
yeah.
a superior film. Yeah.
Scary music in
And
that one too. All the music cues were like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
very good.
Hmm.
Another really abstract, or not abstract, but underrated film in the found footage genre is Hell House LLC.
Yeah.
I That's been in my top, few for the last few years since I
Oh
saw
man.
it. It's
Yeah, Hell
it's
House was
so good.
that was good. It did such a good job of I think this the I think this is the movie I'm thinking of. That's the one where it's like this haunted house in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
and then they go in and yeah, and everything goes wrong. Um,
Yeah, they've been, like, planning to make it an attraction for the whole month of October, and, like, it's actually haunted.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that was a good
That one was
movie.
great.
Yeah, did a really good job of like creating space.
Mhm.
Like by the end of the movie, it's like you could almost navigate through the house, and that just made everything creepier. We're like, oh no, don't go in that room. There's bad things in there.
Yep, that, and it felt so claustrophobic by the end because
Hmm.
nobody could leave.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, so good.
yeah,
Um,
like,
before we wrap it up, one online social media website, where can people find you?
good question. I am pretty much everywhere. My website is meganmcduffie.com,
Hmm.
and that's a good centralized hub for all my stuff. I'm on Twitter, Megan McDuffie, Instagram, Meg McDuffie.
Okay.
And those are kind of the 2 main social platforms that I use. I have a YouTube channel, which, has some awesome recent music videos that y'all should check out.
Cool.
And that's Megan McDuffie Music.
Nice. And then Spotify is where all of your music stuff is.
Yes, Spotify, you will find all of my releases, all of the releases that I've been a part of, all of my soundtracks. Bandcamp's another great place, although not everything is on there because I've done so many collaborations that are on other artists' pages, so those won't be there.
Okay. Well, Megan, thank you so much for the time and for the conversation. It's been very insightful. and really look forward to hearing what you do next.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun to be on. I'm glad I could join you.
Likewise. And then where's the record button? That damn record button.